You've been told your entire life to set goals, define them, chase them, break them into milestones, visualize the outcome. And if you still don't follow through, set better goals, more specific, more motivating, more ambitious. But here's the inconvenient truth. Some of the most consistent, high-performing people on the planet don't operate on goals at all. They operate from a completely different center of gravity. Not vision, not targets, but silence. That's right. The absence of goals can be the very thing that unlocks momentum. And if that sentence makes your logical brain twitch, you're exactly who this video was made for. Because what I'm about to show you isn't a rejection of ambition. It's a total upgrade of the system that powers it. Let me make this clear from the start. This is not about laziness. This is not about passivity. And it's definitely not about giving up on excellence. It's about eliminating the one hidden mechanism that kills forward motion before it even begins: over-attachment to outcomes. When your identity becomes entangled with a goal, your nervous system enters a state of preemptive judgment. Every action becomes a test. Every delay becomes evidence of failure. Your brain stops focusing on execution and starts simulating failure scenarios. That's not accountability. That's self-sabotage disguised as discipline. Neuroscience backs this up. When you fixate on a distant outcome, the brain increases activity in the default mode network. That's the system responsible for mind-wandering, self-evaluation, and worst-case simulations. So while you think you're being productive by obsessing over the result, you're actually activating the very circuitry that undermines consistent action. You're burning energy on imagined futures instead of using it to move forward. And here's the paradox. The more intense the goal, the more paralyzing the simulation becomes. You start fearing the gap between where you are and where you think you should be. You become so focused on not failing that you stop starting. That's the silent cost of goal obsession. And it's why sometimes the most powerful upgrade isn't to double down on goals. It's to let go of them entirely for a moment, not forever, just long enough to reset the system. To break the loop of internal performance anxiety, to create what I call a point of silence. A clean, empty frame where motion is no longer tied to outcome, but to alignment. That's the real game changer. Because once you decouple action from achievement, something incredible happens. You stop trying to win, you start trying to move. And movement, when sustained without friction, becomes unstoppable. So how do you create that point of silence? The kind that amplifies execution instead of drowning it in pressure. You do it through a protocol I call zero intent. Here's the paradox. When you remove intent, you remove interference. You give your nervous system permission to act without judgment. The goal is not to do nothing. The goal is to do without projecting. Think of a sniper in complete stillness. He's not passive. He's fully engaged. But his awareness is tuned to the present. No chatter, no timeline, just execution. That's the zone you want to build. A mental environment where the only objective is the next clean rep. One step, one breath, one iteration. Your performance stops being a referendum on your worth and starts becoming a series of elegant, repeatable moves. Neuroscience calls this transient hypofrontality. It's a state where the prefrontal cortex, your judgment and self-monitoring center, calms down. And when that happens, action becomes fluid. You're not calculating effort, you're flowing through it. And the best part? You don't need hours of meditation to reach that state. You need structure. Which brings us to the protocol. Here's how zero intent works in the real world. First, isolate one recurring task that usually triggers friction. Doesn't matter if it's writing a report, making a call, or opening the laptop. Pick one. Second, remove all goal-based language from your mind. You're not trying to finish. You're not building a skill. You're just initiating motion, that's it. Third, perform a single minimal version of that task without internal commentary. No tracking, no self-talk, just movement. You can do this in less than 30 seconds. The fourth step is where it gets interesting. After the task is complete, instead of reflecting on success or failure, you breathe once. Label the moment clean rep and move on. No journaling, no analysis. Just reset. That final breath is what marks the edge of the loop. It tells your nervous system, this was safe, this was efficient, this is repeatable. Over time, this rewires your behavior from outcome-driven to action-anchored. You start associating execution with calm, not tension, and that changes everything. Because once the system trusts action, it doesn't need motivation. It moves because movement has become the default. Now here's the shift that unlocks the next level. Once you train your system to operate without goal-induced tension, you clear the space for adaptive precision. That's when execution becomes intelligent, not mechanical, not impulsive, but deeply responsive. And here's why it matters. Your brain isn't a machine that thrives on pressure. It's an adaptive filter. Every moment it's selecting signals, discarding noise, and allocating energy. When you flood it with rigid targets, you overload that filter. You create cognitive static. But when you reduce internal commands to zero, when action becomes the only signal, your nervous system starts optimizing. It learns to detect the path of least resistance. It starts using prediction instead of willpower. That's when motion becomes scalable. Not because you're pushing harder, but because your brain has switched from conscious effort to implicit learning. Think of a Formula One driver. He's not thinking about each micro movement. His system is trained to execute the lap. That's what zero intent installs, a lap mode for your day. A neurological short circuit to hesitation. You don't talk yourself into momentum, you build a runway that removes the need for conversation. And here's the tactical code to reinforce it. Every day for the next 5 days, select one task that normally triggers mental negotiation. Before it starts, give yourself 5 seconds of complete stillness. Eyes on one point, breath steady. Then initiate action with zero dialogue, one clean rep. When it's done, breathe once and mentally tag it. Clean rep. That tag is not fluff, it's reinforcement. You're telling your basal ganglia, your habit engine, this is a pattern to preserve. This is efficient. This is safe. Do this 5 days in a row, and by day 6, the action will begin before your mind even enters the room. That's not self-discipline. That's neural architecture. You're not pushing a boulder uphill. You're redesigning the hill. Here's what most people miss. The goal itself is not the enemy. The problem is the psychological attachment to the goal as the source of motion. That attachment creates pressure. Pressure creates resistance, and resistance creates delay. But when you drop the attachment, you unlock a different energy source, the loop of micro-reinforcement. Not I must achieve, but I already moved. The dopamine system, the engine of drive, is not wired to reward distant milestones. It's designed to reward completed circuits. And the fastest way to build momentum is not to stretch the circuit, but to shrink it. That's the next protocol, micro-circuit compression. Here's how it works. Instead of setting outcomes for the day, you define a set of movements, not tasks, movements. You don't say, I'm going to write 3 pages. You say, I'm going to place fingers on keys and type for 2 minutes. Then you repeat that circuit 3 times with a full reset in between. The reset is crucial. It tells your brain the rep is complete. That signal is what gives you the chemical payoff. And this is where science stacks in your favor. The ventral striatum, your reward center, responds more reliably to perceived completion than to perceived effort. Which means the better you are at closing loops, the more naturally you'll want to open new ones. That's the engine behind elite performance, not big goals. Fast loops, smooth transitions, zero friction, and the deeper tactic here is awareness. You need to catch the moment your mind says, this is pointless. That voice is the old software. When it triggers, you don't argue. You just run the next loop. Movement, reset, until the body takes over and the resistance fades like background noise. You're not ignoring outcomes. You're just not giving them authority. You're reclaiming control at the level of structure. And in high-performance environments, that's where the leverage is. Not in the strength of your intention, but in the speed of your feedback. Not in how much you want to win, but in how fast you close the loop. This is where the real leverage emerges. Once your system starts to reward the act of movement itself, not the projection of success, not the fantasy of outcome, but the raw execution, you enter a state called implicit drive. It's not hyped, it's not frantic, it's stable, mechanical, and deeply satisfying. And the reason is this: your nervous system begins to recalibrate its reward hierarchy. Instead of chasing abstract rewards, it starts registering velocity as value, not distance covered, just speed of response. This is how elite performers look so calm under pressure. It's not because they feel nothing. It's because their system isn't burning fuel on what if. It's locked into what now. And here's the next installation to reinforce that state: the silence window. Once a day, preferably mid-cycle, after 2 or 3 completed reps, you enter a 5-minute window of stillness. No input, no screens, just breath and presence. This isn't mindfulness, this is recalibration. You're teaching your system to recover without stimulation. That one practice resets your baseline dopamine sensitivity. It sharpens focus, it prevents burnout, and most importantly, it reestablishes your internal authority. Because here's the truth. If your mind can't be quiet, it can't lead. It just reacts, and reaction is not leadership. So you take that silence window and you defend it like a ritual. No compromise, that becomes your control room, where motion meets clarity, where effort meets alignment. This is the point of origin for all elite motion, not goals, not motivation, stillness, precision, action, repeat. That's the loop, and every time you run it, you're burning a deeper groove into your identity. Not as someone who gets things done, but as someone who doesn't need noise to move. And that's the paradox most people never crack. The less you chase motion, the more motion you generate. The less you force outcomes, the more outcomes follow. Because what you've built is not a fragile routine. It's a durable operating system. You've replaced motivational spikes with behavioral circuitry. You've overridden the outdated software that says, I need clarity before I act. Now your system says, I act, and clarity follows. That shift is permanent, and it's powerful. Because now you're not a goal-driven unit. You're a system-driven machine. And machines don't ask for permission. They don't need inspiration. They just run. With silence at the core, precision at the edge, and speed in every loop. That's the game, that's the edge, and that's the reason why those who seem the calmest often move the fastest. They've found the point of stillness, the place where noise ends and signal begins. That's the place you operate from now. So if you're done chasing goals that burn you out, if you're done dragging yourself towards some future version of yourself, you've got the code. Install it, run it, refine it. And if you want to keep building your arsenal of performance codes, systems that eliminate hesitation and generate dominance, subscribe now. Because on this channel, we don't chase progress, we manufacture it. Welcome to Success Code.